This is a continuation of the prior video. Sir, I once called for commissars. I ask you to reconsider, sir, because it is absolutely necessary to attack this madness with organized and secure command and control and overwhelming force. I've watched the development of the border control and understand this is within executive authority and does not threaten our nation as the use of regulars would. Good. A great power threatens us all, sir. What threatened your presidency threatens our entire civilization, and if we do not intervene immediately and establish strong boundaries, this madness does threaten the fundamental human rights of at least half of the population of our world. As Antifa, of course, I must speak, even when called a selfish psychopathic animal, by an enemy that in very basic projection calls me exactly what it is itself, a controlling rapist. It is the madness of circular logic based on a false principle. It is used to discredit, disempower, disorganize, fragmenting, dividing to conquer. Liars and thieves, redefining good men from their own perspectives, and without due process of defense of self, who are ruthlessly attacked where our integrity is questioned and cycle of violence is incited by those who carry the belief of integrity resulting in hatred versus self or hatred of others. Madness. Too often resulting in the suicide of our most honored and strongest civilian warriors who deserve at least legal finding rather than summary execution of those that scream righteousness in their own righteous indignation, wholeheartedly and ruthlessly attacking enemies that are perceived in their own insecurities, for which they are punished to death daily. This is madness and lunacy, sir. It is an absolute mistake to call these men and blame them and prosecute them, as my case will clearly show upon thorough and professional adjudication. Surely our efforts to seize the enemy within will yield intelligence to allow prosecution of all that participate in this vigilante system to immediately disable the enemy and spare further needless death. Sir, I did not set you in the sights of your political opponents, revealing my warning of a great threat and need to treat as a pandemic in order to contain a short time before coronavirus erupted. I did this intentionally and with the purpose to arm you with the nuke to defeat your enemies. Let us not forget that those monitoring my correspondence, our enemy, also had that intel, and it is in fact the enemy to blame, not you. You're innocent, sir. Those on the left that criticize you are associated as internal enemies will be outed and discredited, destroying themselves and attacking you. You are welcome, sir. I offer this gift in friendship and seek to preserve your legacy and clear your name. Your contribution and service, because we are now confronting tyranny worldwide, and that can never be forgotten. It has been my honor to serve with you. And we can do this together, arms locked, all of us, moving in unison in our anger and violation of civil infractions and intolerances. And we need Black Lives Matters. We need them. Because when the deceivers are revealed, you will see a great group of Americans in Portland that are using their framework of corruption and malice that was originally designed for Ukrainian women, where it is either still illegal or was shortly ago illegal to even copulate with the black person. To me, quite symbolic of white supremacy. Those projecting to attack the self of those with integrity, armed with madness. It is them who are evidentially racist. How can a minority progress in an overpriced and highly controlled market? They cannot. They isolate the poor and disabled from returning due to controlled housing pricing and the cost of living to be out of reach. That is not black friendly. It is not any kind of friendly, but exclusive. Those that try and failed are thrown into their social systems that steal life and kick those that have fallen well down. And now they will be revealed, resetting our order. I know you care, sir. So does Kamala. So do I. We are a team working for the same and now. While you may have questioned her qualifications in the past, she is a highly qualified in fighting for human rights. All of us want order. We all want the same thing. I know I am unpleasant to those untrained and often lost in misunderstanding with those that fear me and their prejudice and insecurity. I do love my conversations with psychologists, as it is my sincere hope that this coming conversation takes this conversation to our leaders for further action and investigation. This is titled Personnel and Credibility. Language is often to use control. And in this case, I make no secret that I have an agenda of closing this case and resolving this file in whole. While there are those that will judge and call me bad names, it is also within right, legal American right. I stand now doing what I could not do before, protecting myself and my family, making rational appeal to authority, facing my fear of all of authority, risking my own life. My children are in danger. I am also exhausted and needing repletion. My daughter has been recently diagnosed with complex PTSD and son has lost to repression and currently untreated. I make the appeal to my family is not lost even if today it downpours. Scientifically, now is an ideal time for safety and treatment in that neurologically their neural pathways can be corrected most easily at the ages rather than allowing for no treatment. Neil is still a child, and while I do lack authority now to force therapy, there is short order with a judge and likely to be found in mutual agreement without litigation. Being socially responsible, I have chosen to confront the source of my trauma, my rape in the early 90s, rather than react to what Dr. Board described as a violation of my sexual rights, which I interpreted as re-traumatization or yet another rape. I had enough power to not directly blame those that assaulted me, but the integrity to confront self and fight within, and in this process did wonderful work for our people in addition to finding my own security. And now I have the ability to enact a rational plan which is moderate and scope small, acquiring shelter just blocks from my family in a secure community. I will create trust to ensure community in America and weather this storm. With a settlement from my authority to the source of the repeated trauma or in compensation as a VA whistleblower, I can simply move forward, moving from my location now, sleeping on my daughter's floor just for safety during the crisis of words as I fear reprisal. With the settlement, I can simply move across the street with my daughter. We both deserve escape this home, but it is all that is safe for us now. The ranch's history and an old chapter of pain, and I am moving forward, not backwards. I need support right now. My daughter and I are working together to support each other in our fitness and nutritional goals. As my daughter has encountered the same interference in the use of the kitchen and the home, this interferes in her nutrition has affected her health as it does all of the inhabitants. One person's need to control superseding the health of 4 other adults in this home. And in the last years, I have called the VA hotline in complaint looking for support and escape, and consistently I have been told one thing: this is your problem, not their problem, over and over again. And when I have been spoken in preference for other, more tolerant cultures, I am told my problems will not go away by leaving this country. From my perspective, this is simply a false premise that the problems are found in me, not the external environment. That is circular logic. Why does my daughter experience the same problem and she is not me? Oh, I ask. And when I am disabled and without the capability to provide self and have no means or capability to escape, I am told the solution is found in self. In other words, become dependent and suffer. Suffrage and humility. Dominated. Okay, next headline is independence. Sometime last year, I was shocked to hear my daughter say that her mother told her I was off learning to become independent. Due to my own obvious injury of Bell's palsy, my award was received days later. I got into a hotel and bought a Jeep immediately. I escaped to the forests and mountains of Colorado for a reprieve. Shortly after that, I received the unemployability, giving me the means to self-support due to my lack of credibility or capability due to service-connected disability, and enough funds to purchase outdoor equipment and an adventure trailer. This began an amazing adventure, where for the first time in a very long time I was able to scream into the ether, releasing and processing my negative emotions. I learned my equipment in parks first, then went further to release my wrath, trading between forests and deserts and camps and RV parks. I pound my way back to my children in Washington, where I was within 100 miles of their home. I was able to see them both again at a public park in their hometown. I remember that I laughed and asked her to evaluate her own mother's dependencies and evaluate mine, and she could decide which of us were independent. To forget the words and to see with their mind. Her mother might have said those words, but as is so often obvious in the projection of oneself in insecurity, as I have done erasing the psychopathy myself, screaming into the computer as I have repeatedly triggered, talking to no one. In Washington, and after seeing town after town of filled trailer parks and pissed off men with obvious and advertised victims advocates, I was empowered to begin a victim statement which I was drafting to take to the victim's advocate in the neighboring town. During this process, I saw the face of my rapist in this re-traumatization, both metaphorically, where I connected first this behavior in my girlfriend in Ukraine, then perceiving the catfishing as likely, and hearing her proposition that this was all just a game for me to grow and my old life awaited me. I don't want my old life. Then one day, shortly before I believe I was poisoned and redirected, which is manipulative and harmful, I saw her in a black muscle car, gripping the steering wheel, staring at me, while her husband Jason snored in ignorance, head propped to the sky, sleeping it off. I also perceived a meeting of a perfect survival partner, after I had expressed his needs screaming into the ether on my very first day in Washington. Perfect, except he knew my people, and he was celibate. I did proposition the idea of a survival partner, and he told me that he owned vacant land and in a nice camp with an old greyhound in a neighboring town's trailer park, which I had investigated. He told me he was interested. Further, I was surveilled while in Washington. I did not call Kenny. I had already decided I had deserved better, and I abandoned Washington for Oklahoma when I needed to decide where my support was, when I believed my life depended on it. I do not want to move that way, but this way. Remembering a new me, that's the new chapter here. When my doctor told me I was sick, I asked what I could do. I rejected Portland mostly because I did not want exposure to the deprivation controls. I deserve better than that. For me, there is more to this life than suffrage. I will not submit, and I will not have my needs be redefined by another, nor will I live in blame for crimes I have not committed. This is un-American and it is illegal, and I will forever resist, eternally defiant. It is unjustified punishment in illegal seizures of my property, my name, my reputation, and my power. The narrative of the left and the violence of the unconscious often contradicts rational opinion or opinion based upon evidence. Why? Was this a design for all as it occurred, as it has with our division and confusion? 50 years of soft bombing with an arsenal, just like slow-motion nukes that leave property, converting enemies to slaves. Our enemies puppeting our own people, the great force in this world, now ripe for the picking, incredibly vulnerable. Feminism is a Trojan horse and a covert war to conquer America. If any man can be targeted and disempowered by this system, then our strongest, those capable of resisting and destroying, are discredited, quietly making us, as a nation, weakened. I will argue this is actually the modality of psychology that is the source of the misunderstanding. Here's a perfect example. Recently, my daughter spoke to her therapist, and her therapist told her, speaking of her father, that I was fragmented and projecting far from self. In other words, psychopathic. Now that is projection. Evidence shows the direct contrary, and Dr. Borg would not at all agree in her incredibly comprehensive examination, and I most certainly do not agree. Confusion being the enemy of confusion being the weapon of our global enemy. Here are the facts. This is psychopathy discrediting me by calling me bad names rather than the system itself at fault. In actual evidence, the Dr. Borg will attest that during my exercise with post-evaluation interview with Dr. Borg, I demonstrated empathy and compassion in my refusal to pursue legal restitution or restoration of my rights, recognizing those who violated my rights were hurt children, unable to heal and destined for misery, while I could move forward with happiness. This is incontrovertible evidence of higher awareness, not psychopathy, despite any other indicators which are only circular logic based upon ignorant and incorrect assumption. Further, I chose to scream at a computer rather than processing experientially with people, showing continued care for others. Further, having the courage to confront my actual trauma rather than react with the blame of psychological violence as continued evidence. Those are not the actions of a fragmented person projecting and far from self, but the actions of a self-aware being scientifically. Frankly, I do not know what your C-file says about me, but I will say that despite the terrible PTSD systems, and as a result of the psychopathic abuse very much to the methodology expressed in the book Malignant Self-Love, that I am not psychopathic. There is direct evidence to the contrary. Further, this statement itself is further evidence that I seek restitution responsibly from the source of the trauma before confronting those legally responsible in this re-traumatization. Continued evidence to the contrary. One cannot be self-aware and psychopathic. They are direct contradictions. However, one can be self-aware and suffer from extreme PTSD symptoms. What is real and what is fake? So to those on the other side of the screen that believe they are right and have 1,000,000 words to prove it, perhaps it is without your knowledge or consent, but you are here as an agent to our global enemy. In their words, they're with you. To those that aid me, the support is welcome. Very simply put, no matter what story of what kind of motherfucker you think I am, I will destroy you in court with an infinite amount of psychologists that will discredit everything you say and reinforce my actions as consistent with self-awareness. Your words are actually a narrative, which is far from evidential fact, proof to the danger psychopathy poses to all of us, and a gateway to destroy your systems, protecting our veterans. I welcome your fight. In war, we all find self. I know who I am. I stand as a lone beastie boy, Paul Revere. Who are you? I came to the VA, and instead of care and support and compensation and benefit, I received deprivation conditioning and was asked why I blame, where I have been offered legal recourse by third-party court officials. Because they have violated my rights. That is why. My rights do matter, to me at least. I refuse to coexist with those that will not respect those rights. I will not trade with those. Which is why I cannot coexist within a society and people that consistently re-traumatize in their blame. A battered wife cannot recover in a home of her abuser. No one can heal from PTSD until the abuse stops. Consistent abuse just compounds existing PTSD. Traumatic events must cease in order for PTSD to set before becoming symptomatic. The mind, this organ, under my skull, is my most basic form of personal property, my flesh and blood. The process I have endured at your hands has been manipulative and harmful, and I can easily show that any evidence of repeated Bell's palsy in this cancer is irrefutable proof. I do not know, perhaps this is the deep state reflected at the VA, are associated with social discovery, adventures. Are you patriots or insurgents? It is a well-known psychological fact that the cycle of violence begins with an attack on self or integrity. This attack results in psychological violence against self or others, which too often results in suicide, veteran suicide. I stand against your system. In Portland, 90% of reported rapes are dismissed. I say that in fact because Dr. Borg told me and she works with the DA in Portland. Now imagine the same proportion with reports to Rain. Now imagine that same proportion in this process. Opinion, even highly specialized opinion, does not supersede judicial opinion. Further, RAIN is built from volunteers, not qualified professionals. People who do what they need that are not to do are dangerous in this context and not helpful to anyone, mostly themselves. The corruption of the pollution of the toxicity. My daughter's therapist also suggested that I was in fact expecting others to help me rather than helping myself. No, I am expecting my property that was destroyed to be repaired or replaced, which is my right as a point of very basic law. Further, every step I have crushed through my psychological barriers to grant myself progress and further happiness and development of harmony. My adventure in Ukraine and the start of my spiritual journey in Holland and my active psychological efforts are a direct contradiction to this conclusion. The reason psychopathy directly contradicts leaving us as a people is sourced in our institutionalized psychological violence. Projection, projection, projection. Further, my daughter's therapist suggested that everyone around me was responsible for my success and it was not just me. Yet I know a language, which is a skill I developed in self-education, and was able to sit down and code a very basic listing of my database from memory without reference. I do not want to be in that business and I will not move forward, but this was my milestone. I needed to accomplish this. As a father, I hear this from my own daughter who is consulting a professional, corrupting her perception of her father. Institutional psychological violence. During the same conversation with my daughter, she was dismissive to her brother, attempting to gain distance as he's not been good to her. She also told me she was recently diagnosed with complex PTSD. There was a time when I hid, but now I must speak, because ultimately my kids need me. I speak because I am loyal to our Constitution, which is terribly violated. I speak because I value self and family, not slavery. It is my opinion there is grounds to a special election for president and a thorough investigation. I also need to speak with Kamala and strategize to avoid needlessly stigmatizing women, because it is very dangerous. I formally request whistleblower protection. This is my greatest Eagle Scout project. Ultimately, I speak for all those that cannot. In the eternal words of Michael Jackson, you try to scream, but terror takes away the sound before you make it. It's done now.